The world we know today is an intricate mosaic of civilizations, religions, and cultures, each deeply rooted in centuries of human evolution and understanding. But to truly grasp the essence of who we are, we must first turn our gaze back, long before the advent of cities, writing, or recorded history. We must look to a time when humans lived in small, scattered groups, surviving in harsh, uncharted territories, with only the tools and instincts they could forge themselves. It was in this primordial world that humanity began its search for something greater, something beyond mere survival, a need to connect with forces unseen, to find meaning in their fleeting existence, and to explain the mysteries of the world around them. The year is 40,000 BCE. Our ancestors were scattered across vast landscapes, ranging from the ice-covered tundras of northern Europe to the sun-scorched savannas of Africa. They lived in constant struggle with their environment, yet their resilience allowed them to survive and eventually thrive. These early humans were not the primitive beings we often imagine. They were intelligent, resourceful, and emotionally complex, capable of forging deep connections with one another and with the world around them. In the quiet depths of these early societies, a profound shift was occurring, a shift that marked the birth of something that would shape human existence for millennia, the emergence of spirituality. While we often associate religion and spiritual practices with the written scriptures and organized temples, their roots lie much deeper in the ancient rituals and beliefs of our ancestors. These early forms of spirituality were not driven by doctrine or organized rituals, but rather by the universal human need for meaning, comfort, and understanding. As our ancestors faced the challenges of survival, they began to look beyond the immediate physical world for answers to the larger questions of existence. What happens after death? Why does the world work the way it does? What is the meaning of life? These were questions that could not be answered by the tools of survival alone. They needed something more, something intangible to make sense of their lives. In the absence of writing or codified beliefs, the earliest expressions of spirituality were deeply personal and tied to the environment around them. Ancient humans would have looked at the stars, the wind, the animals, and the cycles of nature and seen more than mere phenomena. They would have seen the hand of something greater. They would have seen the divine in the world around them. And so, in the stillness of their existence, they began to create their first spiritual practices, born from awe, fear, and the need for understanding. As we delve into the earliest forms of religion, we will explore how these early humans began to weave meaning into their daily lives. Through their art, rituals, and understanding of the natural world, they gave birth to the first known religions, a spark that would light the path for future generations. Before we journey further into the ancient world, I want to take a moment to connect with you. If you're enjoying this exploration of humanity's spiritual beginnings, please hit the subscribe button, and join us as we uncover more of these fascinating stories. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Are you at home, on the go, or maybe winding down for the night? We'd love to hear from you. And if this content resonates with you, feel free to share this video with others who may be intrigued by the dawn of human spirituality. Every interaction helps us continue bringing you more of these deeply immersive journeys. Now let us return to the story. As we begin to explore the ancient human connection to the spiritual realm, we must first understand the environment in which these early spiritual practices took root. The land our ancestors walked was as harsh as it was beautiful. Vast stretches of untamed wilderness, filled with towering mountains, dense forests, and expansive plains, offered both awe-inspiring beauty and terrifying danger. It was a time when humans lived in constant vulnerability. The elements were unpredictable, animals roamed freely, and life was fragile. The threat of wild beasts, harsh winters, and scarce food sources loomed constantly. Yet, in the face of such adversity, early humans found a way to thrive. It is this resilience, this unyielding drive to survive, that laid the foundation for their spiritual beliefs. One of the most profound aspects of early spirituality was its deep connection to nature. Early humans did not see themselves as separate from the natural world. They were intrinsically linked to it. They understood the rhythms of nature, the change of the seasons, the rise and fall of the sun, the migration of animals, and the flow of rivers. These natural cycles were not merely observed, they were revered. They held deep spiritual significance for early humans, who saw them as the workings of divine forces. The weather was not just weather, it was a message. The sun was not just a star, it was a god. As we look at the remnants of these early spiritual practices, we find evidence in the form of cave art, carvings, and figurines. These artifacts, etched into the stone, speak of a time when humans sought to communicate with the world beyond their immediate senses. The act of creating art was not just about aesthetic expression, it was about creating a connection with something greater. It was about leaving a mark, not just on the earth, but in the spiritual world as well. Cave paintings, particularly those found in regions such as southern France and northern Spain, offer us a glimpse into the beliefs and rituals of early humans. These paintings often depicted animals, bison, horses, and aurochs, alongside mysterious symbols and shapes. Some researchers believe these images were not just artistic representations, but were imbued with spiritual significance. They may have been used in rituals, invoking the power of the animals for hunting or spiritual guidance. The first spiritual expressions were not confined to art alone. Rituals and practices, such as the burial of the dead, became an integral part of early spiritual life. Early human burials, often accompanied by offerings or grave goods, suggest a belief in an afterlife or a reverence for the deceased. It's likely that these practices were among the earliest forms of ritual, marking the dead as sacred and ensuring they were honored in the spiritual realm. One of the most poignant aspects of these rituals is the emotional connection they reveal. Early humans faced the loss of loved ones, just as we do today. The fear and sadness of death were universal, but it was through these rituals that early humans sought to transcend that fear, to connect with something beyond their understanding. Burial practices were not just practical, they were deeply emotional and spiritual acts designed to ensure that the deceased would find peace in the afterlife. As we continue to explore the spiritual lives of early humans, we will uncover more evidence of their beliefs. These beliefs, while primitive by today's standards, were no less profound. They were a reflection of the human desire to make sense of the world, to find meaning in the chaos, and to connect with something larger than themselves. They were the first whispers of religion, the first glimmers of humanity's eternal search for the divine. As we journey through the past, we begin to understand how spirituality emerged as one of the most enduring aspects of human existence. It is not just a relic of the past, but a thread that continues to weave through our lives today. The first religions were born from a deep need to understand, to connect, and to transcend the harshness of the world. Through cave art, rituals, and reverence for the natural world, our ancestors began to shape the first inklings of what would become organized religion. These early beliefs were not just about gods and rituals. They were about survival, emotional connection, and understanding the unknown. And it was in this search for meaning that the first religion emerged, rooted in nature, in the mysteries of life and death, and in the enduring spirit of humanity. Nature was the first teacher to humanity, offering both life and death, beauty and danger, nourishment and destruction. The landscape that early humans inhabited was vast and diverse, ranging from the icy plains of the north to the scorching deserts of Africa, the endless savannas, dense forests, and towering mountain ranges. Yet in every corner of the earth, nature was not merely an environment to be survived. It was a partner in the dance of life, a divine force that governed existence. As early humans walked the earth, they faced a world that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The rhythms of nature were their constant companions, visible in the rising sun, the cycle of the moon, the passage of seasons, and the migration of animals. Nature was more than just a backdrop to their lives. It was sacred. It was the embodiment of the divine. In this segment, we explore how early human spiritual practices were deeply rooted in their perception of nature. Their beliefs were intertwined with the world around them, and it was through this profound connection to nature that their first religious ideas began to take shape. To early humans, the earth was alive, a living, breathing entity. Every mountain, river, and forest had significance. The land was not just a place where they lived and hunted. It was a space infused with spiritual meaning. The presence of natural features, such as large rocks, unique trees, caves, and springs, often held symbolic importance. Some researchers believe that early humans saw these landmarks as places where the boundary between the human and divine worlds was thin, where spirits could be contacted or invoked. Rivers were often seen as sacred, flowing between the realms of the living and the dead, much like how many modern religious traditions view water as a purifier. Mountains, towering over the land, were often seen as the homes of gods, ancestors, or spiritual forces. These natural features were not only central to survival, they were also gateways to the divine, as early humans believed they were infused with powers beyond their understanding. In the vast savannas or dense forests, early humans would have felt the constant pull of nature's power. Every animal they encountered was not merely a source of food, it was a symbol, a messenger from the spirit world. The presence of certain animals in sacred places could have signified the presence of deities or supernatural forces. In a world where humans were so deeply attuned to their surroundings, it's easy to see how such beliefs were deeply rooted in the observation of nature. One of the most powerful symbols in early human spirituality was the sky. The sun, moon, and stars were among the most visible and constant elements of nature. The sun, with its life-giving warmth, was revered as a source of energy and vitality. In many ancient cultures, the sun was considered a god or the embodiment of the divine. To early humans, the sun represented more than just a celestial body. It was a powerful force, the source of life, a symbol of creation and renewal. The moon, by contrast, represented cycles, growth, change, and mystery. It governed the tides and was a key element in marking time. Early humans would have observed the waxing and waning of the moon, associating its phases with the rhythms of life itself. Just as the moon transformed over time, so too did the human experience. It was an emblem of change, renewal, and perhaps even rebirth. The stars held a similar significance. To early humans, the stars were not just distant lights in the sky. They were the ancestors, the gods, or the spirits of those who had passed on. Many ancient cultures across the world share the belief that the stars are the souls of the deceased, or that the stars are the dwelling place of gods. These beliefs likely originated from early humans' ability to navigate and make sense of the world by looking at the sky. The stars were not just guides for travel, they were keys to understanding the mysteries of existence, shining down upon humanity like divine, watchful eyes. In their belief system, early humans would have felt that the sun, moon, and stars were alive, constantly in motion, shifting and interacting with one another. They were not isolated in the heavens, but were seen as part of the natural world, intimately connected to the cycles of life below. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of early human spirituality was the connection to animals. The animals that roamed the earth, great and small, were much more than sources of food or threat. They were symbols of power, spirit, and life itself. The first evidence of this spiritual connection can be seen in the numerous depictions of animals in cave paintings and carvings, where animals like bison, horses, and mammoths are central figures in the artwork. To early humans, animals were deeply connected to the divine. Many believed that animals held spiritual power, that they could communicate with the gods or ancestors, and that they played a role in the spiritual cycle of life and death. Shamans, spiritual leaders who communicated with the spirit world, may have worn animal skins or used animal bones in their rituals to symbolize their connection to these powerful spiritual beings. In the hunt, the killing of an animal was often seen as a sacred act, one that had spiritual consequences. Some anthropologists argue that early humans engaged in ritual hunting, where the hunt was performed not just for food, but as an offering to the animal spirits. Through the hunt, they hoped to establish a sacred bond with the animals, ensuring future successful hunts and maintaining a spiritual balance with the creatures of the earth. The reverence for animals extended to the belief that certain animals could embody the qualities of gods or spirits. For instance, the wolf, revered for its intelligence and pack dynamics, may have been seen as a spirit guide or protector. Similarly, the bear, with its immense strength and independence, could have been a symbol of power and courage. The early humans' connection to animals also extended into the spiritual realm of death. The presence of animals in burial sites, whether as offerings or as symbolic representations, shows the deep respect and reverence that early humans had for the animal kingdom. Some cultures believed that animals escorted the soul of the deceased to the afterlife, guiding them through the transition from life to death. The cycles of nature, the changing seasons, the migration of animals, the blooming of flowers, and the dying of leaves were deeply symbolic for early humans. These natural rhythms were not only essential for survival, they were also the foundation of early spiritual beliefs. The cycle of life and death mirrored the cycles in nature. Birth, growth, decay, and rebirth were seen as universal processes that govern the natural world. Just as the seasons turned, so too did life itself. Early humans likely saw the change of seasons as symbolic of the spiritual cycles: birth in the spring, flourishing in the summer, death in the winter, and rebirth in the fall. In many ancient belief systems, the cycle of nature was linked to the concept of renewal and regeneration. This understanding of cycles likely influenced the way early humans viewed their lives and the afterlife. The belief that life followed a cyclical pattern may have been one of the earliest understandings of death and rebirth, influencing the creation of religious myths and rituals centered around life after death. Nature's influence on early human spirituality wasn't limited to their observations of the physical world. It also shaped the ways in which they practiced their religion. Rituals were central to early human beliefs, and many of these rituals were directly tied to natural events. The changing of the seasons, the appearance of certain animals, and the availability of food sources would have all played a role in determining when and how rituals were performed. The first spiritual rituals likely revolved around nature's cycles, marking the passage of time, honoring the spirits of animals, and ensuring the fertility of the earth. Early humans would have used the tools and resources available to them in the natural world to craft objects of spiritual significance, such as carvings, totems, and symbols, representing the forces of nature they revered. Rituals also involved music and dance, activities that would have had a deep spiritual significance. The rhythms of drums, the chanting of voices, and the movement of bodies in dance were ways to connect with the spirits of nature, seeking guidance and blessings. The sounds of nature, wind, water, animal calls were often incorporated into these rituals, creating a harmonious link between the spiritual and natural worlds. In the early days of humanity, nature was more than just the backdrop of existence. It was the very fabric of life itself. Through their connection to the earth, early humans began to develop their first spiritual practices, forming the foundations of religion. Every element of nature, every tree, river, animal, and celestial body was seen as a reflection of the divine, a force to be understood and revered. As we journey further into the exploration of the first religion, we will see how these beliefs began to take shape in the form of rituals, art, and mythology. Yet it is the profound connection to nature that lies at the heart of early spirituality. It was nature that first inspired awe, fear, and reverence, a reflection of the divine that would guide humanity for millennia. The walls of prehistoric caves are silent witnesses to humanity's earliest expressions of spirituality and creativity. These ancient paintings, carvings, and engravings hold within them not just depictions of animals and landscapes, but a deeper meaning, a connection to the divine, the sacred, and the unknown. As we look at these remnants from a distant past, we are confronted with a profound question. What motivated these early humans to create art in a world where survival was the most pressing concern? Why did they dedicate precious time and energy to leave behind images of animals, symbols, and abstract shapes on the walls of caves? The answer lies not only in their need for communication, but also in their desire to connect with the supernatural and understand their place in the universe. This segment will delve into the profound role of cave art and symbolism in the spiritual lives of early humans. These artworks were not mere decorative expressions, they were central to the spiritual fabric of prehistoric societies. They were a window into early human consciousness, offering us a glimpse of how our ancestors understood the world around them and sought to interact with it on a spiritual level. Cave art is often considered one of the earliest forms of human communication and expression. The oldest known examples of cave paintings are found in places like Lascaux in France, Altamira in Spain, and Chauvet Cave, also in France. These paintings date back as far as 40,000 years, but their meanings and purpose continue to elude modern understanding. One thing is certain, these early artworks were deeply symbolic, representing more than just an aesthetic expression of the environment around them. The paintings typically depict animals such as bison, horses, aurochs, and stags, along with occasional geometric shapes and symbols. These animals were not just seen as sources of food or danger, they were spiritual beings, imbued with power, and their images were thought to hold significance. The belief that these animals were spiritual entities or sacred beings is supported by many scholars who argue that cave art may have served as a form of ritualistic magic. In these rituals, early humans may have believed that by painting or carving an animal on the cave walls, they could invoke its power for successful hunts or connect with the spirit of the animal itself. The process of painting these animals was an act of respect and reverence. Some researchers argue that these images may have been created to ensure the success of a hunt. Early humans, in their struggle to survive, relied heavily on their relationship with nature and the animals they hunted. By creating these images, they could have been offering a form of tribute or prayer, invoking the spirit of the animal and asking for its guidance or favor. In essence, the animals depicted on the cave walls were not mere representations. They were seen as symbols of life, death, and the spiritual connection between humans and the natural world. In addition to the more realistic depictions of animals, prehistoric cave art also contains abstract symbols and shapes that challenge our understanding of early human thought and spirituality. These symbols, often geometric in nature, were not representations of the physical world but seem to serve a different, more spiritual function. Scholars have long debated the meaning of these symbols, but one prevailing theory is that they represent a symbolic language, one that connected early humans to the supernatural and allowed them to communicate with forces beyond the physical realm. One of the most common types of symbols found in cave art are geometric shapes such as spirals, dots, handprints, and lines. These shapes, while simple, may have held deep spiritual meaning. The spiral, for example, is often seen in various cultures as a symbol of life, growth, and the passage of time. It could represent the cyclical nature of existence, the eternal flow of life, death, and rebirth. The handprint, often found in caves, like those in the Chauvet Cave, is particularly intriguing. Some researchers suggest that handprints may have been symbolic of the Creator's connection to the world. By pressing their hands to the wall, early humans were leaving a mark, not just on the physical world, but in the spiritual one as well. These abstract shapes may have been used in rituals, functioning as a form of communication with the divine. In the absence of written language, these symbols were a way to convey spiritual concepts, beliefs, and desires. Early humans did not need to write or speak to communicate with the divine. They could simply leave these marks, knowing that the spirit world would hear their message. It was through these symbols that early humans could interact with the supernatural, ensuring their survival and invoking spiritual power. One of the most compelling theories about the creation of cave art is its connection to shamanism. Shamans, often considered intermediaries between the human and spiritual worlds, played a central role in early religious practices. It is believed that early humans may have used cave art as a tool in shamanistic rituals, helping them enter a trance-like state to communicate with the spirits of the animals they hunted or the forces that governed the natural world. Shamanism is an ancient practice that has existed in various forms across cultures. Shamans were believed to possess the ability to communicate with the spirit world, often through altered states of consciousness, meditation, or rituals. The paintings and symbols in the caves could have been part of these rituals, helping to facilitate the shaman's connection to the spiritual realm. These images may have served as guides or symbols that the shaman could focus on during a ritual, allowing them to transcend the physical world and enter a deeper spiritual consciousness. The connection between cave art and shamanism is particularly evident in the use of certain animals as symbols. The paintings of animals were not just representations, they were spiritual beings in their own right. By painting these animals on the walls, early humans could invoke their power, asking the spirits of the animals to guide them in their hunts or to provide protection and strength. The act of painting these animals on cave walls was therefore a form of ritual magic, a way to connect the physical world with the divine. The caves themselves were not merely locations for artistic expression, they were also sacred spaces. In many ancient cultures, caves were seen as portals between the human world and the underworld or the spirit realm. The darkness of the cave, the stillness of the air, and the isolation from the outside world created an environment conducive to introspection, meditation, and spiritual connection. For early humans, these caves were not just shelters from the elements. They were the entry points to the divine. It is believed that early humans chose these caves not only for their practical benefits, but also for their spiritual significance. The act of entering a cave was akin to entering a sacred space where the mundane world was left behind, and the individual could connect with the spiritual forces of nature. The paintings and carvings on the walls were part of this sacred process, a way for early humans to leave their mark on the spiritual world and to communicate with the divine forces that governed their lives. The act of creating art within these caves also had a ritualistic component. The process itself was sacred. Painting or carving on the walls was an act of spiritual creation, an offering to the gods or spirits that inhabited the natural world. The reverence for these caves and the art within them underscores the deep spiritual beliefs of early humans. The cave was not just a physical space, it was a sacred space where the earthly and the divine intersected. As we look at these ancient paintings today, it is easy to forget the deep emotional power they held for the people who created them. These images were not created in a vacuum, they were the result of a profound need to connect with the divine, to understand the mysteries of life and death, and to seek protection and guidance. Every brushstroke, every carving was an act of faith, an expression of the human desire to transcend the physical world and touch the spiritual. The emotional power of cave art lies not only in its beauty, but in its ability to connect us with our distant ancestors. The act of looking at these paintings today is, in a sense, a form of communion. We are not merely observing history, we are connecting with the very essence of humanity's earliest spiritual experiences. The handprints, the animals, the abstract symbols, all of them speak to a deep, primal need that transcends time and culture. They remind us that in the face of an often harsh and indifferent world, early humans turned to art and spirituality as a way to find meaning, to seek connection, and to express their deepest fears, hopes, and dreams. Cave art is far more than just a historical artifact. It is a window into the spiritual lives of early humans. It represents the first attempts by our ancestors to communicate with the divine, to make sense of their world, and to leave a lasting mark on the universe. The animals, symbols, and shapes that adorn the walls of ancient caves are not just representations of the physical world. They are expressions of belief, of a deep and sacred connection to the forces that governed life, death, and everything in between. As we continue to explore the origins of religion, we see how art, ritual, and spirituality were inseparable in the early human experience. Through their art, early humans sought to transcend the physical realm and touch the divine. And in doing so, they created the first forms of religious expression that would influence the spiritual practices of generations to come. In the shadowy recesses of ancient caves, beneath the endless sky, and within the folds of the earth, early humans created the first spaces where the sacred and the mundane converged. These spaces were not just physical locations, but spiritual realms, places where humanity could connect with the divine, seek protection, express reverence, and make sense of the mysteries of life and death. Rituals performed in these sacred spaces became the foundation of early human spirituality, marking the beginning of organized religious practices that would evolve and spread across the world in the millennia to follow. In this segment, we explore how early humans' understanding of the spiritual world manifested through rituals and the creation of sacred spaces. From burial practices to the use of caves as ceremonial sites, early humans' connection to their environment was not just physical, it was deeply spiritual. These rituals and sacred spaces were integral to their belief systems, helping them navigate the challenges of existence, connect with the divine, and find meaning in a world full of uncertainty. Rituals are among the earliest forms of religious expression. In their most basic form, rituals are prescribed actions performed with specific intent, often repeated in a structured manner. The origins of ritual practices can be traced back to early human societies, where rituals were enacted not only for practical purposes, such as hunting or agricultural cycles, but also for spiritual or psychological reasons. These practices, although varied in their expression, were deeply ingrained in the human experience, acting as a bridge between the human and divine realms. The first rituals likely emerged as early humans tried to explain natural phenomena and their own place in the world. In a world where life was fragile and unpredictable, rituals offered a way to cope with uncertainty and fear. These rituals were an attempt to make sense of the mysteries of the world, such as birth, death, and the changing of the seasons, and to control, or at least influence, the forces that govern their lives. One of the earliest forms of ritual was the burial practice. Early human burial sites suggest that death was not seen as a simple physical event, but as a transition to another realm. The careful placement of the body, the inclusion of grave goods, and the positioning of the body to face the rising sun or toward sacred mountains all hint at a deep belief in the afterlife or spiritual continuation. These burial practices were ritualistic in nature, carefully orchestrated acts that marked the passage of the deceased into the spiritual world. Evidence of early burial rituals is found in many archaeological sites across the globe. In places such as Songir, Russia, and Bruniquel Cave, France, we find evidence of complex burial sites where the bodies of the deceased were surrounded by offerings, tools, ornaments, animal bones, and other significant objects. These items were not merely placed with the body. They were intended for the deceased's journey into the afterlife, indicating a belief in an existence beyond the physical world. The idea of sacred spaces, places imbued with spiritual power, was fundamental to the development of early religious practices. Early humans sought out specific locations that they believed were special or charged with spiritual energy. Caves, mountaintops, rivers, and groves were often chosen as sites for rituals and ceremonies because they were seen as places where the divine could be accessed. One of the most famous examples of sacred spaces is the cave. Caves were not just shelters for early humans. They were considered sacred places where the boundary between the earthly and spiritual realms was thin. In many cultures, caves have long been viewed as portals to the underworld or the afterlife, a place where spirits dwell and can be communicated with. It is within caves that some of the earliest examples of ritual art and ceremonial practices can be found. The Lascaux Caves in France, home to some of the most famous prehistoric cave paintings, were likely used for more than just artistic expression. Archaeologists believe that the act of painting animals on the cave walls could have been part of a larger ritualistic practice, one that sought to ensure a successful hunt or invoke the spirits of the animals for protection. The placement of these paintings deep inside the caves, far from the reach of sunlight, suggests that the caves were not simply a place to depict the world outside, but were meant to be immersive spiritual spaces. Similarly, caves like those in Altamira, Spain, were used as ceremonial spaces where rituals involving animal spirits, fertility, and death may have taken place. The walls of these caves were transformed into sacred canvases where early humans engaged in spiritual practices and sought to connect with the supernatural. The connection between sacred spaces and spiritual rituals was often mediated by shamans, spiritual leaders who acted as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. Shamans were believed to possess the unique ability to communicate with the divine, and they played a crucial role in the religious and ceremonial life of early human societies. Shamans are often depicted as the first practitioners of religion, using their spiritual knowledge to guide others through the mysteries of life and death. In many early human societies, the shaman was the central figure in religious rituals. They were responsible for leading ceremonies, conducting healing rituals, and offering guidance to the community in times of crisis. The role of the shaman was especially significant in hunting and survival rituals. Early humans believed that animals had spiritual power, and the shaman's role was to invoke the spirits of these animals through ritual, ensuring a successful hunt or safe passage through dangerous territory. Rituals performed by shamans could include chanting, drumming, dance, and the use of sacred objects, such as animal skins or bones, to help induce a trance-like state that allowed the shaman to communicate with the spirits of the animals or the divine forces. In some cases, animal masks or costumes were worn by shamans during these rituals. The transformation into an animal was thought to allow the shaman to take on the spirit of the creature, enhancing their ability to communicate with the spiritual world. These costumes, often made of animal hides and bones, served to blur the line between the human and animal worlds, reinforcing the belief in the interconnectedness of all living beings. The use of sacred spaces, such as caves, mountaintops, or forests, during these rituals was essential for setting the spiritual tone. These locations were often chosen for their symbolic connection to the natural world or the spiritual realms. By performing rituals in these sacred spaces, shamans sought to draw on the power of the land, the animals, and the elements, reinforcing the belief that nature itself was imbued with spiritual significance. As early humans developed more complex religious beliefs, the practice of sacrifice emerged as a key component of their rituals. Sacrifice was an act of offering something of value, whether it be an animal, food, or even human life, to the divine forces in exchange for favor, protection, or guidance. The earliest forms of sacrifice were likely animal sacrifices, as animals were seen as sacred beings with spiritual power. The act of offering an animal in sacrifice was a way of appeasing the gods or spirits, ensuring that the community would receive their blessings in the form of a successful hunt, fertility, or protection from harm. These sacrifices were often performed in sacred spaces, such as caves or ritual grounds, and were accompanied by prayers, chants, and other ceremonial acts. In some early societies, human sacrifice was also practiced, although this was likely a more rare and extreme form of ritual. Human sacrifice was seen as the ultimate offering, one that would appease the gods or spirits and guarantee the safety and well-being of the community. While evidence of human sacrifice in prehistoric times is rare, there are instances where human remains have been found in ritual contexts, often alongside animal remains and offerings. The ritual of sacrifice reinforced the belief in the power of the divine to shape human existence. It was an act of surrender, a way for early humans to acknowledge their dependence on the spiritual forces that governed their world. By offering something of value, they sought to forge a stronger connection with the divine, ensuring their survival in a world filled with danger and uncertainty. Rituals were not only a means of communication with the divine, they also served a psychological and emotional function. Early humans lived in a world full of danger, unpredictability, and hardship. Rituals provided a way to cope with fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. They offered a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic world, helping individuals and communities navigate the complexities of life and death. Rituals, especially those surrounding death and the afterlife, allowed early humans to process grief and loss. Burial rituals, for example, provided a way for families and communities to honor the dead, ensuring that the deceased would be properly cared for in the spiritual world. This act of care and respect helped to assuage the fear of death and provided a sense of comfort and closure for the living. The emotional power of rituals is also evident in the communal aspects of early religious practices. Rituals were often performed in groups, fostering a sense of unity and solidarity. The collective participation in rituals helped to reinforce social bonds and create a shared sense of meaning and purpose. In times of crisis or uncertainty, these rituals provided a framework for individuals to come together and find strength in their shared beliefs. As we look back at the rituals and sacred spaces of early humans, we gain insight into the spiritual foundations of humanity. These rituals were not merely acts of superstition, they were deeply meaningful expressions of belief, connection, and hope. They were the means by which early humans sought to understand the mysteries of the world and navigate the challenges of survival. The creation of sacred spaces, the performance of rituals, and the belief in the divine were central to the development of religion. They provided early humans with a framework for understanding their place in the universe, forging a connection with the natural world, and seeking solace in the face of uncertainty. These practices would evolve and transform over time, but their roots can be traced back to the rituals and sacred spaces of our prehistoric ancestors. As we continue to explore the origins of religion, we see how these early religious practices laid the groundwork for the spiritual traditions that would emerge in later civilizations. The rituals, beliefs, and sacred spaces of early humans remain an enduring legacy, reminding us of the power of faith, community, and the desire to connect with the divine. In every culture throughout human history, there have been individuals who served as bridges between the physical world and the unseen spiritual realms. These figures, often known as shamans, spiritual leaders, or medicine people, played pivotal roles in the development of religious practices, guiding their communities through rituals, healing practices, and mystical experiences. In prehistoric societies, long before the establishment of formal religious institutions or written scriptures, shamans were the first religious figures. They were the ones who held the knowledge of the sacred, the divine, and the mysterious forces that governed the world. Shamans were not just healers or wise people. They were intermediaries who could communicate with the spiritual world on behalf of their people. They held the power to heal the sick, protect the tribe from spiritual harm, invoke blessings for fertility or good hunting, and, perhaps most importantly, guide the dead to the afterlife. The role of the shaman was central to the survival and spiritual well-being of early human societies. In this segment, we will explore the role of shamans and spiritual leaders in prehistoric times, examining how they helped shape the early religious landscape. From their connection to nature and animals to their mastery of trance states and spiritual rituals, shamans were at the forefront of humanity's search for meaning and understanding of the supernatural world. The role of the shaman in early human societies was multifaceted and complex. Shamans were not just religious leaders, they were also healers, advisors, and community figures. Their primary responsibility was to mediate between the physical and spiritual realms, facilitating communication with the divine or supernatural forces that controlled life and death. In prehistoric societies, where survival was a constant struggle and death was an ever-present reality, the need for such intermediaries was profound. Shamans served as guides during moments of crisis, helping individuals and communities navigate illness, trauma, or even the mysteries of the afterlife. They were believed to have access to spiritual knowledge and power, which allowed them to perform healing rituals, communicate with the spirits of the deceased, and provide spiritual guidance. In times of crisis, whether it be famine, disease, or war, the shaman was called upon to intercede on behalf of the community, seeking guidance or assistance from the spirits or gods. In addition to their spiritual duties, shamans were also responsible for performing rituals that ensured the well-being of the community. These rituals included rites of passage, such as birth, puberty, and death, as well as seasonal ceremonies designed to mark the changing of the seasons, hunting practices, and agricultural cycles. The shaman's ability to invoke the divine or supernatural forces through these rituals was crucial to the survival of the tribe, as it was believed that their prayers or offerings could bring about favorable outcomes. Shamans held a revered position in early societies, as they were seen as the guardians of spiritual knowledge. Their role was to maintain balance in the community by connecting the people with the divine, helping to ensure prosperity, health, and spiritual harmony. One of the most striking aspects of early shamanism was the deep connection that shamans had to nature and animals. In prehistoric societies, nature was not viewed as separate from the human experience. It was an integral part of spiritual life. Animals, in particular, were seen as spiritual beings that could offer guidance, protection, and power. Shamans often had intimate knowledge of the natural world, which they used to perform rituals and ceremonies aimed at invoking the spirits of animals, plants, or natural elements. Shamans were often associated with particular animals, either as spirit guides or as embodiments of divine powers. This connection to animals was so profound that shamans would sometimes wear animal skins or masks during rituals, embodying the qualities of the animals they were invoking. For instance, a shaman might wear the skin of a wolf, believing that by doing so, they could channel the strength, cunning, and spiritual power of the wolf. This practice was not only symbolic, it was a way for the shaman to embody the animal spirit, allowing them to communicate directly with the spiritual world. Animals were seen as powerful, sacred beings with the ability to communicate with the gods or spirits. By interacting with animals, whether through hunting, observing, or spiritual communion, shamans believed they could gain access to supernatural knowledge. For example, the bear was often revered as a symbol of strength and protection, while the eagle was associated with spiritual vision and insight. In many indigenous cultures, animals were considered to be the messengers of the gods, and shamans would call upon them in times of need. Shamans often entered a trance state to communicate with these animal spirits, either through drumming, dancing, or the use of psychoactive plants. These altered states of consciousness allowed shamans to travel to the spiritual realm, where they could meet with animal spirits and receive guidance or messages from the divine. In this way, the shaman's connection to animals was not just physical, it was spiritual, transcending the boundaries of the earthly world and connecting them to the unseen forces of nature. Healing was one of the most important functions of the shaman in prehistoric societies. The human body was seen as an interconnected system, and illness was often viewed as a spiritual or supernatural affliction. Shamans were believed to possess the knowledge and power to diagnose and treat these spiritual maladies. They would use a variety of techniques, ranging from herbal remedies and physical treatments to spiritual rituals and incantations to heal the sick. Shamanic healing was rooted in the belief that illness was caused by imbalances or disruptions in the spiritual realm. These imbalances could be caused by a variety of factors, such as angry spirits, lost souls, or negative energy that needed to be addressed through ritual. Shamans, with their unique connection to the spiritual world, were able to perform rituals that restored harmony and balance, healing both the body and the soul. In addition to their role as spiritual healers, shamans also played a critical role in guiding individuals through personal crises. They were often called upon to offer advice or wisdom to those facing difficult life decisions, such as whether to leave their community or how to cope with grief. The shaman's ability to provide comfort and guidance was seen as a manifestation of their spiritual power and knowledge. Shamanic healing often took place in a sacred space, such as a cave, a ceremonial site, or even in nature, where the shaman could connect with the divine forces necessary for healing. These healing rituals were not only therapeutic, they were also deeply spiritual experiences where the sick person's connection to the divine was strengthened and restored. One of the most fascinating aspects of shamanism is the shaman's ability to enter altered states of consciousness, allowing them to journey into the spiritual realm. This was a crucial aspect of their role as intermediaries between the human world and the divine. By entering trance states, shamans could communicate directly with the gods, spirits, and ancestors, receiving guidance or instructions that would be shared with the community. The methods for entering these trance states varied widely across cultures, but typically involved a combination of drumming, chanting, dancing, fasting, and the use of psychoactive substances. These practices were designed to induce altered states of consciousness, where the shaman could experience visions, hear voices, or communicate with spiritual entities. In some cases, shamans would use ritualistic drumming to enter a trance. The rhythmic pounding of drums was believed to mimic the heartbeat, synchronizing the shaman's physical and spiritual selves, allowing them to journey into the spiritual world. Dance was another powerful tool used to alter consciousness. By moving the body in repetitive, rhythmic patterns, the shaman could induce a trance-like state where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds blurred. In certain cultures, shamans also used psychoactive plants such as peyote, ayahuasca, or psilocybin mushrooms to facilitate spiritual journeys. These substances were believed to open the mind to the spiritual world, allowing the shaman to receive visions or messages from the divine. While the use of such plants was typically reserved for shamans or spiritual leaders, it played a significant role in the spiritual practices of many early human societies. The shaman's journey into the spiritual realm was not a solitary experience, it was a communal one. The shaman would often share their visions, experiences, and messages with the community, guiding them in times of crisis, providing wisdom, and offering spiritual protection. Death was one of the most profound mysteries of human existence, and early humans sought to understand it through spiritual practices. Shamans played a crucial role in helping individuals and communities navigate death, both in the form of burial rituals and in guiding the souls of the deceased to the afterlife. This role as a guide to the dead highlights the shaman's unique position as an intermediary between the physical and spiritual worlds. In many prehistoric cultures, shamans were responsible for performing burial rituals. These rituals were designed to ensure that the deceased would have a safe journey to the afterlife and would be protected from malevolent spirits. Shamans would often perform ceremonies that involved chanting, offerings, and the use of sacred objects, all aimed at guiding the soul of the deceased to its final resting place. In some cultures, the shaman would accompany the spirit of the deceased on its journey, ensuring that it was not lost or trapped in the physical world. This process was believed to help the soul transition from the earthly realm to the spiritual realm, where it would join the ancestors or gods. The role of the shaman as a guide to the afterlife was an essential aspect of their spiritual power, as they held the keys to both life and death. The role of the shaman has persisted in various forms across time and culture. Although organized religions have largely replaced the role of the shaman in most societies, the shamanic tradition continues to influence spiritual practices around the world. In many indigenous cultures, the shaman is still a central figure, playing a crucial role in healing, spiritual guidance, and communal rituals. The legacy of the shaman is also present in modern spiritual movements, such as neo-shamanism, which draws on the principles and practices of traditional shamanic cultures. The belief in the power of nature, the importance of altered states of consciousness, and the role of the shaman as an intermediary between the physical and spiritual realms continue to resonate in contemporary spirituality. Shamans were the first spiritual leaders in human history. They were the ones who helped early humans navigate the complexities of life, death, and the divine. Through their knowledge of the natural world, their ability to enter altered states of consciousness, and their deep connection to the spiritual realm, shamans played a central role in the development of early religious practices. As we explore the origins of religion, we see how shamans laid the groundwork for the spiritual traditions that would evolve over time. Their role as spiritual mediators, healers, and guides helped shape the way early humans understood the world and their place within it. Their enduring legacy continues to influence spiritual practices today, reminding us of the profound connection between humanity and the divine. Death, the final frontier of human experience, has always been a source of fascination, fear, and reverence. It is perhaps the most profound mystery of existence, one that transcends all cultures, religions, and epochs. Early humans, much like us, grappled with the inevitability of death and sought ways to understand and cope with its presence. But unlike modern societies, where death has been largely removed from everyday life, prehistoric humans lived in constant awareness of mortality. Survival was a daily challenge, and death was not just an abstract concept. It was a tangible, unavoidable force that shaped their existence. As early humans struggled to make sense of death, they developed complex beliefs and rituals surrounding it. These beliefs were not only spiritual, but also psychological, providing a framework for coping with the loss of loved ones and the unknowns of what lay beyond life. Through their burial practices, symbolic offerings, and spiritual rituals, early humans created systems of belief designed to address the profound mysteries of death and the afterlife. In this segment, we will explore how early humans understood and responded to death. From the first burial rituals to the beliefs surrounding the afterlife, we will uncover how prehistoric societies viewed mortality and the spiritual significance they attached to it. We will also examine how these early practices laid the foundation for the complex systems of religious beliefs and afterlife concepts that would emerge in later civilizations. For early humans, death was an inevitable part of life, a constant companion on their journey. Whether it was the death of a loved one, the loss of a family member in battle, or the passing of a tribe member due to illness or natural causes, death was always present. It was a reality that could not be ignored, and early humans needed a way to deal with it. In prehistoric societies, death was often seen as a spiritual event. The passing of an individual was not just a biological process, but a transition from one realm to another, a passage from the physical world to the spiritual world. This understanding of death as a transition rather than an end formed the basis for early human burial practices and their complex beliefs about the afterlife. The first human burial practices provide us with valuable insight into how early humans viewed death. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric humans took great care in burying their dead, suggesting that they did not see death as something to be feared or ignored, but rather as an important event that required reverence and care. Early human burials were often marked by ceremonial rituals, the inclusion of grave goods, and special attention to the positioning of the body, evidence that the deceased were treated with great respect, and that the act of burial had spiritual significance. One of the earliest and most significant ways in which early humans responded to death was through burial practices. The burial of the dead was a ritualized act that served several purposes. It was not just a means of disposing of the body. It was a way of honoring the deceased, ensuring their safe passage to the afterlife, and providing them with the tools they would need in the next world. The care and attention given to burial practices suggest that early humans believed that death was not an end, but a transition to another realm, one that required spiritual preparation. The Neanderthals, one of the earliest human species, are known to have engaged in ritualistic burials, often placing bodies in graves with stones or symbolic markers. Evidence from sites such as La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France shows that Neanderthals buried their dead with care, sometimes positioning them in a fetal pose, perhaps to symbolize rebirth or protection. Similarly, Neanderthal graves often contain tools, animal bones, and other symbolic items, suggesting that they believed the deceased would need these objects in the afterlife. These early burial practices provide strong evidence that Neanderthals had some understanding of death as a significant spiritual event. In later prehistoric cultures, such as those of the Cro-Magnons, early Homo sapiens, burial practices became more elaborate. At the site of Sungir, Russia, archaeologists have uncovered the graves of individuals who were buried with an extraordinary array of grave goods, including finely crafted tools, animal pelts, beads, and ornaments. These grave goods were likely intended to serve the deceased in the afterlife, suggesting a belief in an existence beyond the physical world. The careful arrangement of the body, the inclusion of personal items, and the use of ceremonial burial techniques all point to the idea that death was seen as a significant transition, not just a biological event. Grave goods, items placed in the grave with the deceased, offer some of the most telling evidence of early human beliefs about death and the afterlife. The items buried with individuals were not chosen randomly. They were deeply symbolic and often reflected the personal, social, and spiritual life of the deceased. The inclusion of tools in early burials is one of the most consistent features across prehistoric burial sites. These tools were likely seen as essential for survival in the afterlife. Just as early humans relied on tools for hunting, gathering, and building, they believed that these items would be necessary for their journey beyond death. The act of placing tools in the grave also symbolized the continuation of the deceased's role in the community and their continued ability to provide and protect, even after death. Animal bones were another common feature of early burials. In many prehistoric cultures, animals were seen as sacred beings with spiritual power. The presence of animal bones in graves may have symbolized the connection between the deceased and the spirit world, or it could have been a way of ensuring that the deceased would have the spiritual protection of the animal in the afterlife. For example, the remains of bison or deer found in burial sites might have signified strength, protection, or fertility, qualities that were valued in the next world. Ornaments and personal items, such as jewelry, beads, and ritual objects, were often placed in graves as well. These items, crafted from shells, stones, bone, and other materials, were likely seen as symbols of status, identity, and spiritual power. The inclusion of these items in burials suggests that early humans believed the physical world and the spiritual world were connected, and that the things a person held dear in life would accompany them into the afterlife. The presence of ritualistic items, such as carved figurines or totems, points to the development of more complex spiritual beliefs. These objects may have represented deities, ancestors, or spiritual guides, suggesting that early humans believed they needed spiritual protection in the afterlife. Rituals performed during the burial process, such as chanting, dancing, or offering sacrifices, further reinforce the idea that death was seen as a spiritual transition, one that required careful and deliberate ritual. In prehistoric times, the concept of the afterlife was inextricably linked to the process of death and burial. While the specifics of these beliefs varied across different cultures, a common theme emerged. Death was not the end of existence, but rather a continuation into a new realm. Many early human societies held the belief that the soul or spirit of the deceased continued to exist after death. This belief is evident in the elaborate burial practices and the inclusion of grave goods, which were intended to ensure that the deceased would have everything they needed in the next life. The positioning of the body was also significant, with many early burials found in fetal positions or with their heads oriented toward the rising sun, suggesting a belief in rebirth or renewal. The idea of rebirth was particularly important in prehistoric cultures. In some burial sites, individuals were buried with their faces or heads placed toward the east, symbolizing the connection between death and the daily cycle of the sun. This positioning may have been an expression of the belief that death was a cyclical process, marked by renewal and regeneration. Just as the sun rose each day, so too could the soul of the deceased be reborn in the afterlife, continuing its journey in the spiritual world. The concept of spiritual continuity was further supported by the use of grave goods, which were believed to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. These items, along with the careful and ceremonial process of burial, suggest that early humans viewed death as a transition to a new form of existence, rather than a final end. This belief in continuity after death would go on to shape the spiritual practices and afterlife concepts of later civilizations, forming the foundation for more elaborate religious and mythological systems. In many prehistoric cultures, the spirits of the deceased were not only seen as continuing their journey in the afterlife, but also as active participants in the lives of the living. The ancestral spirits played a significant role in early human spirituality, serving as guides, protectors, and sources of wisdom for the living. Early humans believed that the spirits of their ancestors continued to watch over them, offering protection and guidance. This belief is evident in the rituals performed during burials, where the spirits of the deceased were invoked to ensure their safety and well-being. The inclusion of ancestors in spiritual practices reflected a deep respect for those who had passed on, and a belief that they were still present in the spiritual realm, influencing the lives of the living. In many cultures, the act of honoring ancestors became a key component of religious practices. Rituals of remembrance, such as feasts, sacrifices, and offerings were performed to ensure that the spirits of the dead were satisfied and continued to provide spiritual protection. These practices reinforced the idea that death was not an end, but a continuation of a larger spiritual journey, one that connected the living to the deceased and bound them together in a shared spiritual community. The way early humans understood and responded to death laid the foundation for much of the religious and spiritual systems that would emerge in later civilizations. Through their burial practices, the care they took in preparing the dead for the afterlife, and their belief in spiritual continuity, early humans created a profound and meaningful understanding of mortality. Death was not feared or avoided. It was seen as a natural part of the human experience, a transition that required reverence, respect, and spiritual preparation. The beliefs about death and the afterlife that emerged in prehistoric societies were the precursor to the more complex religious systems that would follow. These early concepts of rebirth, spiritual continuity, and ancestral guidance would shape the spiritual practices of future generations, influencing everything from funerary rituals to the development of gods, deities, and mythologies. As we continue to explore the origins of religion, we see how the human need to understand and cope with death drove the development of spiritual practices. The care with which early humans treated their dead speaks to a profound belief in the continuation of the soul, the presence of spiritual forces, and the possibility of an afterlife. These early beliefs would evolve over time, but their roots can be traced back to the rituals and practices of our prehistoric ancestors. From the earliest days of humanity, animals have held a special place in human culture, not just as food, tools, or companions, but as sacred symbols, spiritual guides, and key figures in the mythologies and belief systems of prehistoric societies. For early humans, animals were not merely biological entities. They were powerful spiritual beings, possessing intrinsic wisdom and sacred qualities that were connected to the divine, the natural world, and the human experience itself. As humanity's first spiritual leaders began to emerge, animals played a central role in rituals, spiritual practices, and belief systems. Their presence in cave art, burial practices, and mythology speaks volumes about their significance in early human spirituality. In this segment, we will explore the profound role that animals played in prehistoric spirituality. We will look at how early humans not only relied on animals for survival, but also revered them for their spiritual power and symbolism. From the earliest cave paintings and carvings to the rituals and sacred spaces of prehistoric societies, animals were deeply woven into the spiritual fabric of human existence. Their symbolic representation in art, myth, and ritual practices reveals the ways in which early humans connected with the natural world and sought to harness its spiritual and life-giving forces. Long before the rise of organized religions, early humans viewed the natural world as sacred, a space where every living being had a purpose and a spiritual essence. Animals were among the most prominent elements of the natural world, revered not only for their role in sustaining life, but also for the spiritual power they were believed to embody. To prehistoric humans, animals were not simply creatures to be hunted or feared. They were reflections of divine forces, messengers from the spirit world, and guides to understanding the mysteries of life. Animals were often perceived as intermediaries between humans and the divine, carrying messages from the gods, spirits, or ancestors. This spiritual view of animals was prevalent across many early societies, where animals were not just part of the physical world, but were symbolic of deeper truths about existence, power, and the cycles of nature. In many ways, animals were seen as bridges between the human world and the supernatural realm. Early humans believed that the behavior and characteristics of animals could reveal important insights into the spiritual forces that govern their lives. For example, the movement of animals during migration or their behaviors in the wild were seen as signs or omens that could guide human decision-making. Shamans and spiritual leaders who were entrusted with the role of interpreting the mysteries of the spiritual world often looked to animals for guidance and wisdom. The actions of animals in the wild were not random. They were viewed as part of a divine pattern, a cosmic order that humans were meant to understand. The belief in the sacredness of animals is reflected in the art and symbols that early humans left behind. The prominence of animals in prehistoric cave paintings, carvings, and sculptures suggests that they held an important spiritual role. These images were not mere representations of the animals that early humans encountered. They were imbued with symbolic meaning. The act of painting or carving an animal was, in essence, a spiritual practice, a way for early humans to connect with the power of that animal and invoke its qualities into their own lives. The reverence for animals in early human societies was not confined to art and symbolism. It was also deeply embedded in spiritual rituals and practices. Animals were often at the center of rituals designed to ensure successful hunting, fertility, health, and spiritual protection. Early humans performed rituals to honor animals, seek their blessing, or ensure their favor. These rituals were often performed by shamans or spiritual leaders who believed that they could communicate with the animal spirits and invoke their power to aid the tribe. One of the most common rituals involving animals was the hunting ritual. In many prehistoric cultures, the hunt was not merely a physical act, it was a spiritual event. The hunt was believed to be an offering to the animal spirits, a way of ensuring that the tribe would continue to be provided for. The act of hunting was framed as a sacred task, and early humans believed that it was important to maintain a respectful and reciprocal relationship with the animals they relied on for survival. Rituals often involved chanting, drumming, dancing, and the use of sacred objects. The shaman or spiritual leader would guide the ritual, calling on the spirit of the animal to ensure that the hunt would be successful and that the animal would willingly offer itself as sustenance. In some cultures, the hunter would offer prayers or thanks to the spirit of the animal before and after the hunt, acknowledging the animal's sacrifice and showing gratitude for the sustenance it provided. This belief in reciprocity, where humans give thanks and respect for what they take from the earth, was central to early spiritual practices. In addition to hunting rituals, fertility rituals also involved animals. The symbolic power of animals was used to invoke the fertility of the land, the animals themselves, and the human community. Many early agricultural societies, though not fully established yet in prehistoric times, began to center their beliefs around the cycles of life, reproduction, and regeneration. Animals like the bull and cow were revered as symbols of strength, fertility, and abundance. These animals were often featured in rituals to ensure the fertility of the land and the people, marking the cyclical nature of life and death. The idea of animal spirits is another crucial aspect of early human spirituality. Many early human societies believed that each individual, family, or tribe was connected to a specific animal spirit known as a totem. Totems were believed to embody the qualities, characteristics, and spiritual power of the animal they represented. These totems served as spiritual guides, offering protection, guidance, and wisdom to the tribe or individual. The connection to a totem animal was considered sacred, and individuals would seek to embody the qualities of their totem in their daily lives. For example, the wolf was often seen as a symbol of strength, loyalty, and wisdom. Tribes that revered the wolf believed that they could call upon the wolf spirit for guidance in times of danger or conflict. The wolf was not just an animal, it was a spiritual ally, a protector, and a teacher. Similarly, the eagle, with its keen vision and soaring flight, was a symbol of spiritual insight and perspective. Tribes that honored the eagle often associated it with the ability to see beyond the physical world, offering spiritual clarity and insight. The belief in animal totems was not limited to individuals. Entire communities were often associated with specific animal spirits. The role of these animals was to provide protection, ensure success, and maintain balance within the tribe. For example, a tribe that revered the bear might believe that the bear's power and courage would shield them from harm and lead them to victory in battle. Similarly, the deer was often seen as a symbol of gentleness and grace, guiding the tribe in times of peace and reflection. Animal totems also played an important role in the realm of shamanism. Shamans would often undergo spiritual journeys to connect with the animal spirits and gain insights into the spiritual world. Through rituals, the shaman would communicate with the spirit of the animal, asking for guidance or wisdom. The shaman would wear animal skins or masks to embody the spirit of the animal, believing that by doing so, they could access its powers. This act of transformation was seen as a way for the shaman to connect more deeply with the spiritual world and gain a greater understanding of the mysteries of life and death. One of the most striking aspects of early human spirituality is the prominent role of animals in cave art. The walls of caves, where early humans etched and painted images of animals, serve as a testament to the central role animals played in their belief systems. These images were not simply depictions of animals in their natural environments, they were imbued with symbolic meaning. The act of painting or carving these animals on the walls of sacred spaces suggests that early humans saw these creatures as more than mere representations of life. They were symbols of spiritual power and divine influence. The cave paintings at Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauvet reveal a deep connection between early humans and the animals they revered. In many cases, the animals depicted in these caves are shown in dynamic poses, as though captured in mid-motion, giving the viewer a sense of their power and vitality. These images were not just for artistic expression, they were meant to invoke the spirit of the animals, to connect with their energy, and to ensure their continued presence in the lives of early humans. The bison, a common motif in cave art, is often depicted with exaggerated features, such as large horns or massive bodies. This was likely done to emphasize the animal's strength and power, qualities that early humans would have sought to invoke in their spiritual practices. Similarly, the horse, a symbol of freedom, movement, and agility, was often depicted with great attention to detail, highlighting its importance in prehistoric societies. These animals were more than just representations of the natural world. They were viewed as sacred beings that embodied spiritual power and wisdom. The placement of these animal images in caves also speaks to their spiritual significance. These images were often painted or carved in areas deep within the caves, far from the light of day. This suggests that the caves were seen as sacred spaces where the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual realm was thin. The act of creating these images in such remote, dark spaces may have been a way of connecting with the animal spirits in a more intimate, profound way. The reverence for animals in early human spirituality is not just a relic of the past. It continues to resonate in modern spiritual practices and belief systems. The role of animals as symbols of strength, wisdom, and spiritual connection has persisted throughout human history. influencing religious practices and mythologies across cultures. From ancient Egyptian deities like Bastet, the cat goddess, to the Native American belief in animal spirits and totems, the spiritual significance of animals has remained a cornerstone of human spirituality. In modern spirituality, the idea of animal totems and spirit animals continues to thrive. Many people today believe in the power of animal spirits to guide and protect them, invoking their qualities to navigate the challenges of life. The connection between humans and animals, though often overlooked in contemporary society, remains deeply rooted in our collective consciousness, reminding us of the spiritual power that these creatures embody. The relationship between early humans and animals was not simply a matter of survival, it was a profound spiritual connection. Animals were seen as sacred beings, guides and protectors, their spirits woven into the fabric of human existence. Through their reverence for animals, early humans sought to understand the mysteries of life and death, to connect with the divine, and to ensure their survival. The presence of animals in cave art, burial rituals, and spiritual practices speaks to the central role they played in early human spirituality. These creatures were not just part of the natural world, they were reflections of the divine, powerful symbols of life, death, and rebirth. The reverence for animals in prehistoric societies laid the groundwork for the spiritual traditions that would follow, and their legacy continues to shape our understanding of the sacred connection between humans and the natural world. Throughout the course of human history, music, dance, and storytelling have held an essential role in shaping culture, communication, and spirituality. For early humans, long before written language, these forms of expression served as the primary means of connecting with one another and with the spiritual world. Music, dance, and storytelling were not just means of entertainment, they were powerful spiritual tools used to express emotions, convey knowledge, and invoke the divine. In prehistoric societies, the spiritual connection to the world was deeply intertwined with the body and sound. The rhythmic beating of drums, the melodic chanting of voices, and the fluid movement of the body were seen as ways to transcend the physical realm and enter a state of heightened awareness where humans could communicate with the divine, seek guidance from the spirits, or express their deepest emotions. These practices were not just personal, they were communal, fostering a sense of shared identity and spiritual connection within the group. In this segment, we will explore how music, dance, and storytelling were utilized in early human spiritual practices. We will look at their roles in religious rituals, ceremonies, and cultural expressions, as well as their connection to the physical, emotional, and spiritual lives of early humans. From the first use of rhythm in shamanic trance to the communal dances that celebrated life and death, music and dance were central to the formation of early human spiritual life. Music, as one of the oldest forms of human expression, has always held a powerful place in human societies. For early humans, music was not just a form of entertainment or communication. It was a vital tool in connecting with the divine and the spiritual world. Music allowed early humans to express their deepest emotions, invoke the power of nature, and establish a connection with the spirits. It was through rhythm, melody, and sound that early humans could bridge the gap between the earthly and spiritual realms. The earliest forms of music were likely created using the body itself. Early humans would have clapped their hands, stomped their feet, or used objects found in their environment, such as rocks or animal bones, to create rhythm. These primitive instruments served as the foundation for more complex musical traditions that would follow, but the significance of rhythm in early spiritual practices cannot be overstated. Rhythm was seen as the heartbeat of the earth and the cosmos, an expression of the divine order of the universe. The drum is perhaps the most ancient and widespread musical instrument used in spiritual rituals. The drum's deep, resonant sound mimics the rhythm of the heart, and in many cultures, it was believed that the drum beat could connect the human soul to the divine. Shamans, spiritual leaders, and healers would use drums in their rituals to enter a trance-like state, allowing them to journey to the spiritual realm and communicate with the gods, ancestors, or animal spirits. The repetitive, steady beat of the drum served to focus the mind, synchronize the body, and facilitate the shaman's connection with the unseen world. In addition to drums, early humans would have used flutes, rattles, and stringed instruments to produce sounds that were thought to carry spiritual power. These sounds were often used to enhance rituals, deepen the experience of the participants, and create an atmosphere that was conducive to spiritual communication. The sound of music, in this context, was not just an aesthetic pleasure. It was a spiritual force designed to transform the consciousness of the listener and guide them toward a higher state of awareness. Alongside music, dance was another vital form of expression for early humans. Dance was not only a way to celebrate, socialize, or tell stories, it was a form of communication with the divine, a physical manifestation of the connection between the body and the spirit. Dance allowed early humans to express the emotions that were difficult to articulate in words, and it provided a way to align their physical selves with the rhythms and forces of nature. Dance was central to many shamanic rituals, where it was used as a tool to help the practitioner enter a trance state, facilitating a journey into the spiritual realm. Through movement, the dancer could align their body with the cosmic rhythms, entering a heightened state of consciousness that allowed them to communicate with the spirits. Shamans would often dance while drumming, using the synchronized rhythm of their movements and the sound to induce a state of spiritual transformation. In addition to shamanic rituals, communal dances were an integral part of early human spiritual practices. These dances were performed as a group, often during key moments in the agricultural or hunting cycles, such as harvest celebrations or before a hunt. These dances were a way for the community to come together, to align their spirits, and to seek the favor of the gods or spirits. The physical act of dancing, as a collective, reinforced the community's shared spiritual beliefs and fostered a sense of unity and connection. In many cultures, dance was also used to mark important life events, such as birth, death, marriage, and puberty. These rituals, often performed with music, were a way to honor the transitions of life and to invoke divine blessings for the individuals involved. The act of dancing to mark the passage of time, whether it be the seasons or the stages of life, created a connection between humans and the natural world, reinforcing the cyclical nature of existence. Storytelling, the art of conveying knowledge, emotions, and spiritual truths through spoken word, was another key element of early human spirituality. Before the advent of written language, storytelling was the primary means of preserving history, passing down knowledge and explaining the mysteries of existence. Stories were the vessels through which early humans connected to their ancestors, to the gods, and to the natural world. Through storytelling, humans could convey their deepest fears, hopes, and wisdom, sharing their collective experiences and understanding of life, death, and the divine. Early human stories were likely based on the natural world, on the animals, plants, and landscapes that shaped their lives. These stories were not mere entertainment, they were sacred expressions of spiritual truth designed to teach lessons, explain the mysteries of the universe, and reinforce the community's shared beliefs. Many of these stories were myths, narratives that explained the origins of the world, the forces of nature, and the relationships between humans and the divine. Mythology often centered around creation stories, where gods or spirits shaped the world, or heroic tales in which humans interacted with divine beings or overcame great challenges. These myths were a way for early humans to make sense of the world around them, to understand their place in the universe, and to learn how to navigate the spiritual and physical worlds. They served as guides for living, providing moral lessons and teaching the community about the natural order and the spiritual forces that govern their lives. In addition to myths, oral traditions also included practical stories about survival, hunting, gathering, and coping with the challenges of daily life. These stories were passed down from one generation to the next, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would not be lost. These oral traditions were a crucial means of preserving cultural identity and spiritual beliefs, binding together the community through shared experiences and collective wisdom. Storytelling, like music and dance, was a communal activity. The act of gathering around a fire, sharing stories, and passing down knowledge fostered a sense of unity within the community. Storytellers, often revered for their wisdom, played an important role in preserving the history and beliefs of the tribe. The stories they told connected the community to its ancestors, to the natural world, and to the divine forces that shaped their existence. In many early human spiritual practices, the voice itself was considered a powerful tool for invoking the divine. Chanting, singing, and reciting prayers were all essential components of religious rituals used to call upon the gods, spirits, and ancestors. The power of the human voice was believed to carry spiritual energy, which could be used to invoke blessings, cast out evil, or communicate with the divine. The chant was one of the earliest forms of vocal expression used in religious contexts. Repetitive chants, often accompanied by drumming or other instruments, were designed to help the practitioner enter a trance-like state, allowing them to connect with the spiritual realm. These chants were often simple, rhythmic, and repetitive, helping to focus the mind and synchronize the body with the cosmic rhythms. In addition to chanting, song played an important role in early rituals. Singing was not just a way to communicate with the divine, it was a way to embody the emotions and energies of the ritual. The human voice, in all its tonal and emotional complexity, was believed to be a conduit for spiritual energy. Whether it was a song of praise, a prayer for protection, or a lament for the dead, the act of singing helped early humans align themselves with the divine forces they sought to connect with. In some cultures, the human voice was believed to have the power to shape reality. The idea of word magic or spells was widespread in many early belief systems, where the act of speaking or singing certain words could bring about physical or spiritual changes. The belief in the transformative power of sound is still present in many cultures today, where chanting, prayer, and sacred songs are used to invoke spiritual power and transformation. The spiritual power of music, dance, and storytelling has not been lost over time. These forms of expression continue to play a central role in modern spirituality, from religious rituals and ceremonies to personal practices of meditation and reflection. The rhythms of the drum, the power of the voice, and the art of storytelling continue to shape spiritual practices and connect individuals to the divine. Many modern spiritual practices, such as meditation, yoga, and shamanic rituals, draw heavily on the traditions of music, dance, and storytelling. The use of mantras, chants, and sacred songs in meditation and prayer reflects the ongoing belief in the transformative power of sound. Similarly, dance remains an essential part of many religious and spiritual ceremonies, from the ecstatic dance of Sufism to the ritual dances of indigenous communities, and the art of storytelling, whether through myth, parable, or oral tradition, continues to be a vital means of transmitting wisdom, values, and spiritual truths. Music, dance, and storytelling are not merely forms of entertainment. They are deeply spiritual practices that have been used for millennia to connect with the divine, to express the human experience, and to foster a sense of community and shared identity. From the earliest drums and chants to the communal dances and oral traditions of prehistoric societies, these forms of expression have shaped the way humans interact with the spiritual world and each other. As we explore the origins of religion, we see how music, dance, and storytelling laid the foundation for religious practices and spiritual beliefs that continue to shape humanity today. These practices were not just ways to entertain or pass the time. They were a means of communicating with the divine, of expressing profound emotions, and of finding meaning in the mysteries of life. From the earliest days of human civilization, storytelling has been one of the most powerful means through which societies have understood the world, their place in it, and the forces that shaped their lives. Early myths, rooted in the natural world, in spiritual experiences, and in the complexities of human existence, form the foundation of religious thought and practice. These stories of creation, divine beings, and the origins of the universe became the sacred narratives through which early humans explained not only their origins, but also the mysteries of life, death, and the natural world. Mythology was the primary means of conveying spiritual truths, moral lessons, and cultural values long before the advent of written language. Myths were not mere stories. They were expressions of the human search for meaning, the desire to understand the forces that governed existence, and the need to connect with the divine. In the absence of written records, these stories were passed down orally, often over generations, becoming deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness of early human societies. In this segment, we will explore the role of mythology in early human spirituality, focusing on how myths serve to explain the creation of the world, the role of the gods and divine beings in the spiritual order that governed life. From creation myths to stories of divine intervention, we will uncover how early humans sought to understand the origins of the world and their relationship to the forces of nature and the divine. Mythology served several essential functions in early human societies. At its core, mythology provided explanations for the unknown and the mysterious. In a world without modern science, myths offered early humans a framework for understanding natural phenomena, such as the cycles of the sun and moon, the changing seasons, the behavior of animals, and the forces of life and death. Myths explained why the world was the way it was, providing answers to questions like, where did the world come from? Who created it? Why do we experience pain and suffering? What happens when we die? Mythology also played a key role in social cohesion. By telling shared stories of creation, the gods, and the natural world, early human communities were able to reinforce a sense of collective identity and shared purpose. These myths were the foundation of religious rituals, festivals, and ceremonies, and they helped to define the moral and ethical codes of early societies. They provided the community with a common understanding of the forces that shape their lives, binding them together through shared beliefs and practices. In addition to providing explanations and fostering unity, mythology also served as a moral compass. Many early myths were designed to teach important values and lessons, such as the importance of respect for nature, the need for cooperation within the community, and the consequences of immoral behavior. Through the stories of gods, heroes, and supernatural beings, early humans learned about the virtues they should strive for and the vices they should avoid. One of the most fundamental aspects of early mythology is the creation myth, the story of how the world and everything within it came to be. Creation myths are found in virtually every culture, and they offer a fascinating insight into how early humans viewed the origins of the universe and their place within it. Creation myths often involve a cosmic being, or God, who brings the world into existence. These divine figures are frequently described as powerful, creative, and transformative, and their actions shape the physical world and establish the order of the universe. The creation of the world in many myths is often followed by the establishment of natural laws, the formation of life, and the emergence of human beings. Some of the earliest creation myths are pantheistic, meaning that the world and the divine are seen as inseparable. The natural world, with all its elements, earth, water, fire, air, is imbued with divine power. For example, in many indigenous cultures, creation is viewed as a process in which the gods or spirits shape the world from the raw elements of nature. The physical world itself is seen as sacred, and the gods are believed to be deeply connected to the land, the animals, and the forces of nature. In other creation myths, the world is created from a primordial chaos or void. For example, in Sumerian mythology, the universe begins in a state of watery chaos, and the god Marduk creates the world by slaying the sea goddess Tiamat and dividing her body into the heavens and the earth. This violent, dramatic creation process reflects the early human understanding of the world as a place of both order and chaos, a world that must be shaped and tamed by divine forces. Creation myths often involve a cosmic sacrifice, in which a god or supernatural being gives up part of themselves to create the world. The sacrifice may be physical, as in the case of Marduk in Sumerian mythology, or it may be symbolic, as in the myth of the earth goddess who sacrifices her own body to give birth to the land, plants, and animals. These creation myths were not only explanations for how the world came to be, they also reflected the human condition. Many creation myths involve themes of birth, death, and rebirth, reflecting the cycles of life that early humans experienced. The death of a god, or the sacrifice of a divine being, often mirrors the cycles of nature, such as the death of plants in winter and their rebirth in spring. These myths helped early humans understand the eternal flow of life and death and the interconnectedness of all things. The gods and divine beings in early mythology played a crucial role in shaping the world, establishing moral order and guiding human actions. These gods were not simply distant, abstract entities. They were often depicted as powerful, active beings who interacted with humans and other creatures in tangible ways. They could create or destroy, bless or curse, and shape the destiny of the world and its inhabitants. In many early myths, gods are portrayed as anthropomorphic, having human-like qualities, emotions, and behaviors. They might fall in love, wage wars, experience jealousy, and engage in complex relationships with one another. This humanization of the gods made them more relatable to early humans, who saw themselves reflected in the divine figures they worshipped. The gods represented forces that were both beyond human comprehension and intimately connected to human life. One of the central themes of early mythology is the battle between order and chaos, often personified by different gods or divine beings. In many myths, gods are tasked with establishing order in a world of chaos. The conflict between these forces is often depicted as a cosmic struggle for control, where gods battle for supremacy or protect the world from destructive forces. This dualism between order and chaos is reflected in the natural world, where life constantly struggles against death, creation battles destruction, and harmony contends with discord. In addition to the gods, early mythology also features divine messengers, spirits, and ancestors. These beings often serve as intermediaries between humans and the gods, delivering messages, offering guidance, or carrying out divine will. Spirits of the dead, in particular, played a significant role in early mythologies, where ancestors were believed to maintain influence over the living. This belief in the spiritual power of ancestors is seen in many cultures, where rituals are performed to honor the deceased and maintain a connection with the spiritual realm. Many early myths involve gods who interact with humans directly, often in dramatic or transformative ways. These stories of divine intervention reflect the human desire to understand the connection between the earthly and the divine, and to seek the favor or protection of the gods. In some myths, gods are depicted as creators, shaping the world and its inhabitants. In others, gods appear in human form to guide, challenge, or teach humans important lessons. These interactions between gods and humans often serve as moral lessons, teaching values such as humility, bravery, wisdom, and respect for the divine order. For example, in Greek mythology, the gods often descended to earth in disguise to test or assist humans. Zeus, the king of the gods, would appear in various forms, sometimes as a mortal man, sometimes as an animal, to interact with humans and influence their destinies. These divine visitations were not always benevolent. They could also be punitive, with gods punishing humans for their arrogance, disrespect, or failure to honor the divine order. The gods were seen as both protectors and enforcers of cosmic law, and their actions were meant to ensure that the natural and spiritual worlds remained in balance. In many creation myths, divine intervention is responsible for the shaping of humanity. In Mesopotamian mythology, for example, the god Enki creates humanity from clay, while in Hindu mythology, the god Brahma is credited with creating the world and the first humans. These divine acts of creation are seen as part of a larger cosmic order, where the gods play a central role in the existence of the world and its inhabitants. As societies evolved, the role of mythology also shifted. What began as oral traditions passed down through generations eventually became codified in written texts, leading to the development of more complex and structured religious systems. These early myths, once passed by word of mouth, were now recorded on tablets, scrolls, and papyrus, preserving them for future generations and expanding their reach beyond local communities. The transition from oral to written mythology had a profound impact on the way these stories were understood and interpreted. Written texts allowed for more detailed and elaborate narratives, and they helped to establish a more standardized religious canon. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest works of literature, recorded stories of gods, creation, and the afterlife that were central to Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs. Similarly, the Vedas and Upanishads in ancient India codified the religious and philosophical ideas that would shape Hinduism for millennia. However, even as mythology became written, its function remained deeply tied to human spirituality. Myths were not just historical accounts. They were living, evolving stories that continued to shape religious practices, societal norms, and cultural identity. The development of mythology in early human societies reflects humanity's profound need to understand the mysteries of existence, the divine, and the natural world. Myths were not just stories, they were expressions of spiritual truth, cultural identity, and moral guidance. The creation of the world, the actions of the gods, and the teachings of heroes all served to explain the complexities of life and provide a moral framework for human behavior. As we trace the evolution of mythology, we see how it laid the foundation for the development of organized religion and spiritual practices. From oral traditions to written texts, myths continue to shape our understanding of the world and our place in it. They remind us that in the face of uncertainty, we have always turned to stories to make sense of the universe and our connection to the divine. The journey through the origins of religion and spirituality in prehistoric times has been one of deep exploration into the roots of what makes us human. We have ventured back to a time when survival and spirituality were intertwined, when early humans lived closely with nature and revered the forces that shaped their existence. From the earliest rituals performed in caves, the spiritual connection to animals, the rise of creation myths, to the shamanic practices that connected the living with the divine, the foundations of the first religion were laid by the deepest parts of the human soul. Through these early practices, our ancestors sought meaning in a world full of uncertainty, longing to understand not only how the world came to be, but also the forces at play behind life, death, and the mysteries of the cosmos. The first religions were not organized, formalized systems of belief. They were spiritual practices rooted in the daily rhythms of life. They were born from the fundamental human need to make sense of the world, to seek comfort and guidance, and to establish a relationship with the divine. These practices were deeply tied to the earth, to nature, and to the animals that roamed it. Through art, rituals, music, dance, and mythology, early humans sought to connect with spiritual forces and find their place in a vast, mysterious universe. As we conclude this journey through the origins of religion, we come to a profound realization. The first religion was not just about gods or rituals, it was about connection. Connection to the earth, to nature, to one another, and to the divine. It was about finding meaning in the most fundamental experiences of life: birth, death, love, and survival. Through these early practices, our ancestors built the spiritual foundations that would continue to evolve over thousands of years, eventually giving rise to the diverse religious and spiritual traditions we see in the world today. At its core, the first religions were born from a spiritual awakening, a realization that there was something greater than the physical world. Early humans recognized patterns in nature, the cycles of life, and the mysteries of death. These experiences gave rise to questions. What happens after death? What governs the seasons? Why do we suffer? And how can we find solace? The first religions were attempts to answer these questions, not through logic or science, but through experience, intuition, and a deep connection to the world around them. As early humans began to connect with nature, they recognized the divine in the very fabric of existence: the wind, the sun, the stars, the animals. All were seen as manifestations of divine power. Early humans did not view themselves as separate from nature. They were a part of it, deeply intertwined with the land and the creatures that inhabited it. The first religions were pantheistic, believing that the divine permeated all things. The natural world was not just a place of survival, but a sacred space where the presence of the divine could be felt in every tree, rock, and river. This connection to nature was not just theoretical, it was expressed in every aspect of daily life. Early humans performed rituals to honor the earth, the animals, and the elements. They saw the earth as a living, breathing entity that required respect, care, and reciprocity. The act of hunting, for example, was not just about survival. It was a spiritual practice, one that involved offering thanks to the animals and seeking their permission to take their lives. The rituals that surrounded these practices were a way of forging a spiritual bond between humans and the world around them. One of the most important aspects of early religion was the emergence of shamanism, the belief that certain individuals could communicate with the spiritual realm. Shamans were spiritual leaders, healers, and guides, chosen for their ability to enter altered states of consciousness and travel between the physical and spiritual worlds. They acted as intermediaries between humans and the divine, helping to bridge the gap between the earthly and the supernatural. Shamanic practices were rooted in a deep connection to nature and the animals that lived within it. Shamans often used animals as totems or spirit guides, believing that they embodied divine qualities that could be invoked during rituals. The use of music, dance, and ritual was central to the shaman's practice. Through rhythmic drumming, chanting, and movement, the shaman could enter a trance state where they could communicate with spirits, seek guidance, and heal the sick. Shamanism was not just a system of religious practice. It was a way of life. It was a way for early humans to connect with the spiritual world, to seek answers to life's mysteries, and to navigate the complexities of existence. Shamans played an essential role in guiding their communities, offering spiritual support during times of crisis, and ensuring that the balance between the physical and spiritual worlds was maintained. Another key aspect of the first religions was the development of mythology, the creation of stories that explain the origins of the world, the gods, and the forces that governed life. Myths were central to early religious beliefs as they provided answers to the fundamental questions of existence. How did the world come to be? Why do we suffer? What happens when we die? Creation myths, in particular, served as foundational stories that established the cosmic order and explained the role of the divine in shaping the world. These myths often centered around a supreme deity or cosmic force that brought the world into existence, shaping the land, the seas, the sky, and the creatures that inhabited it. These stories were not only explanations of the physical world, but were also reflections of the spiritual beliefs and values of early human societies. In addition to creation myths, many early cultures developed stories of gods and heroes, figures who embodied the values and qualities that early humans sought to emulate. These myths taught important lessons about morality, bravery, sacrifice, and respect for nature. The gods and heroes of these myths were often portrayed as larger-than-life figures who interacted with humans, offering guidance or punishment depending on their actions. These stories were passed down orally, becoming integral to the cultural identity and spiritual practices of early societies. Rituals and sacred spaces were essential components of the first religions. Early humans created sacred spaces in nature, such as caves, groves, and mountains, where they could connect with the divine and perform rituals to honor the gods and spirits. These spaces were not just physical locations, they were seen as portals between the human world and the spiritual realm. By performing rituals in these sacred spaces, early humans believed they could establish a direct connection with the divine, seeking guidance, protection, and favor. Rituals played a central role in early religious practices. These ceremonies were performed to mark important life events, such as birth, death, and the changing of the seasons. They were also used to ask for divine intervention, whether it be for a successful hunt, a good harvest, or protection from illness. Early rituals often involved sacrifices, offerings to the gods or spirits in exchange for their favor. These offerings could be in the form of food, animals, or even symbolic acts such as prayer or dance. The rituals performed in these sacred spaces were not just about honoring the divine, they were about reinforcing the bond between humans and the natural world. Through these rituals, early humans expressed their respect for the earth, the animals, and the forces of nature that sustained them. The sacredness of the land, the animals, and the elements was deeply embedded in early religious practices, reinforcing the idea that the divine was not separate from the world but was inherent in it. As we reflect on the first religions, we realize that many of the foundational aspects of these ancient spiritual practices continue to resonate in the religious and spiritual practices of today. The connection to nature, the reverence for animals, the belief in the divine, and the importance of rituals, all of these elements are present in many modern spiritual traditions. The first religion was not just a set of beliefs or rituals. It was a way of life. It was about connection to the earth, to the animals, to the divine, and to one another. It was about seeking meaning in a world full of mystery and finding comfort and guidance in the natural rhythms of life. These early spiritual practices laid the foundation for the religious and philosophical systems that would follow, shaping human spirituality for thousands of years. As we conclude our journey into the origins of religion, we invite you to reflect on the profound spiritual connection that early humans had with the world around them. The first religion was not about the pursuit of power or wealth. It was about understanding, reverence, and connection. It was about seeking the divine in the natural world and finding meaning in the cycles of life. If you've enjoyed this exploration of early human spirituality, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth documentaries on the origins of civilization, human evolution, and the development of religious thought. Comment below to share your thoughts. How do you think the spiritual practices of early humans continue to influence us today? And if you're watching this video during a peaceful moment of reflection, let us know where you are and what time it is in your part of the world. Your engagement helps us bring you more content like this. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the distant past. Stay tuned for our next documentary, where we'll continue to explore the rich and fascinating history of human spirituality and evolution.